You're listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
The following episode is not okay for kids like me. Please listen to this one with discretion. Thank you.
All right, folks, you heard it here first from my oldest son. This episode is not safe for work, potentially. And I only say that to put Kevin on the spot because we're back live on the air with my friend Kevin Blas, and now your friend too, who shared with us an amazing portion of his testimony last week and just what the Lord has been doing in his life, some struggles, some authenticity, and I'm honored and blessed to have you back on the show.
Thanks,
and I put that disclaimer in there because who knows where this one's not scripted. So
Tim might drop an F-bomb.
We could go anywhere. Food, that would be the F-bomb I drop because that's what I'm about sometimes, especially
Fanatic. Recently.
So yeah, we could really go anywhere. But what I wanted to pick up before we go anywhere and our ADHD kicks in is you had mentioned on the last episode this idea that you've been working through recently as a husband and father, balance between traveling or missions and homebody or being at home, being content. And we didn't really have time to flesh that out. And so I may have totally gotten that wrong too, but is it a recent thing that you've been working through? And what does that look like? And are we talking homebody, like staying at home? Or are we talking more like be where the Lord has you, be content where the Lord has you? Like, what does that all look like? And when did that start?
Yeah, I would say it's more so be content where the Lord has you, and also recognizing the seasons where he wants you to be that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like, I guess so, to back up, to kind of give a little bit of history of that, when me and my wife first got married, I just feel like I've been gifted and still have the gift of service, and I just love going on mission trips, serving people, especially when it's just, and I say just, but where it's work-oriented, and just seeing people's lives changed through the work we do.
Yeah.
So I guess in particular, Mexico men's build trip where we go down for about 5 days. That's travel and everything. And we actually build basically a unfinished shed, whether it's kind of like one single family or double family.
Okay.
It's basically like a 1-car garage, 2-car garage.
Yeah.
And we hand off a Bible to them. And it's basically just a really cool trip to just do guy stuff, work, get your hands dirty, but also see God work in just our simple way of just showing up, basically.
Yeah.
So that, and then just up until about a year and a half ago, probably actually, yeah, right after the whole COVID stuff, which I actually wanted to try something. So I said COVID. I'm going to say COVID one more time to see if that little blue thing on Spotify comes up that talks about COVID.
Oh, interesting.
And so we won't talk about that, but just to see
is that how you listen to this podcast? Is on Spotify? Or?
Yeah, Spotify. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you do, it pops up a blue disclaimer about or like for your information.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So like before COVID, total tangent, but like I would listen to Joe Rogan, which is also not what your son said, not appropriate for his age. But he does have some good, he just likes to listen, and he has people on there that are either just talking gibberish or they actually have some good people on there to talk about what's going on. But anyways, so if you talk anything COVID, it used to, well, not COVID. Yeah, COVID. If you talk anything COVID, there'd be like a little blue disclaimer saying, if you want more information, but they don't cancel you like YouTube does.
Right.
So, but they just add a little extra thing.
Sure.
So I wanted to say the word COVID just to see if your little thing comes up.
If it picks it up.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
So if anybody's,
well, that's good.
Yeah, wondering that.
You have an Android there or an iPhone?
iPhone.
Oh, that's right, because you sent me iNotes.
Yes.
So you don't listen to me on Apple Podcasts. Interesting.
No, only because Spotify has a cheaper plan.
You have to pay for it? I thought Apple Podcasts came on your phone.
Actually, I think it does.
But you've just always been on.
Yeah, Spotify is just easier.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm used to.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's good information. It does that on Facebook. I know you're all over Facebook, but
Yeah, not anymore.
it does that if you mention COVID in any way,
Mm-hmm.
truth or not. It'll pop up and say this information may be not correct.
Yeah, which is weird because it's like I thought we could make our own decision, but anyways, another podcast.
In another podcast, another day.
Yeah.
In people's attempt to help us sort between truth and untruth, their own perception of truth prevails.
Yeah.
That was a note you sent to me on who legislates morality. And there's an interesting point there that we can maybe also for another episode, depending on your time.
Anyways, just something to think about. Like people always say you can't legislate morality, but I was just listening to a podcast today that says basically kind of turns it on its head. It's like it's going to be legislated no matter what, whether it's good morality or bad morality. But the idea is that who is going to be legislating it? Is it going to be God, or is it going to be our secular anti-God lifestyle? So anyways.
Like the Old Testament theocracy legislating God's morality versus today
humanism
and morality. Yeah, right. Because we legislate the death penalty or not. We legislate abortion or not, and it's man's version of morality versus God's. Sometimes, thankfully, it aligns to God's morality, and more so here in America than almost anywhere else in the world, thankfully. But that's probably more by happenstance and accident than it is on purpose from from who's in power today. So, okay, that was a great tangent.
Yeah.
Thank you all for following us down the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole there. And if you're on drugs while doing this podcast, listening to this episode, please follow us back now as we get back
to the mission field.
To the mission field. So you enjoy that. You feel that your spiritual gift is the gift of service.
Yeah.
And so that obviously is a great way to exercise that gift and fulfill you as you're honoring the Lord with that. Okay.
Yeah. And so, that I've been on that trip twice, and that was a blessing just to see how that works. And just be a part of it and be a part of a bunch of good group of guys. And it's a short trip, so it's an easy trip to do.
Yeah.
Relative to like going on a week or more. And so I guess to answer the question about the different seasons, whether, being kind of drawing yourself back and I guess getting back to home base or being out there just really serving God. Two things could be true at the same time. You can be, obviously you need to be being a good husband.
Yeah.
Well, first being a follower of Christ, being a good husband, and being a good father if you have kids, or being a good father figure to kids who may not have a dad.
Right.
While you be a servant. So for me, serving in the church as a drummer on the worship team, previously being a youth advisor in the youth group, back when me and my wife were dating and first married and had our first child, and then coming away from that just to not be so busy to where I'm always gone, throughout the week. Because a lot of times we can spend our life at church, but hardly at home, or spend our life doing things around the community. And then, so I guess to answer the question, if there was a question, is just recently I found that I really want to draw back, not to not be used in the church and to not make an impact on the community, but to really make sure that I'm doing what God calls me to do, first as a follower of Christ, making sure I'm set in his word correctly, and also leading my wife correctly, instead of like I've seen myself where she's more the leader because I'm being procrastinative or lazy or basically being a man child, and then so leading her correctly, and then leading our family, and that could be as simple as just leading prayer and reading through the Bible together, and seeing where God takes it. I would say there's not one set way to do it, depending on your family aspect, and everything. But I think just being intentional, and being in communication with your wife, and what that looks like biblically, and it's not a overpowering, condescending, like I'm the man, beat your chest kind of thing, but it's a like God made order for a reason,
right?
And we are supposed to be the protectors of our family, and the wife is an equal partner in this, in can't remember what the verse is, but basically in life that God gives us. And she is the great helper that God created for us. And so just working together, but also being the headship that God put in place.
Right.
Because if we're not the headship, somebody else is going to be the headship, whether that's the wife feeling like she needs to be the leader because we're not being the leader, or she finds it in someone else who's doing a better job, not anything like infidelity wise, but just seeking leadership somewhere else, and it might be not good leadership. So that's our job as men, as husbands, as followers of Christ, and as fathers. So, anyways, up until this, basically about a couple of years ago, or before COVID happened, always busy, being a drummer for the church, going on missions, and my wife's been very supportive and, holding down the home base and just really creating an environment of a nurturing home. And that's actually one thing that one of our guys on the mission trip to Mexico said, which really just struck a chord with me. He said that he knows that when he goes on a trip, or no, how do you say it? He said something along the lines of, when his wife is there, his house is a home. Because if she wasn't there, it would just be a house. Because guys think practically, and so the wife makes it a home. And I thought that was really cool.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I guess to simplify it, we're the protectors of that home, and our wives are the ones that make it that home, that nurturing place.
She's the heart of it all, and we're the muscles on the outside.
Yeah,
we need to get strong to protect it.
Yep. Yeah.
If without it, we're just a shell of a man.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a ghost.
So, did I answer your question?
So you were busy. You were doing all this stuff. You were actually one of my brother's youth group advisors. I think my younger brother, Nate. Maybe.
Yeah. Good guy. Funny guy.
Great guy. Yeah. Shout out to Nate and his lovely wife, Sarah.
And the duck dance. He knows what that is. Him and
Toby.
Toby, yeah. Toby Wilhelm. Yeah.
So you're busy. You're doing all this stuff. You've got young kids, and your wife is equally busy nurturing and raising, and you're at work, providing, and then COVID hits, and you're serving at the church, and you're doing these mission trips, and you're serving at church. Then COVID hits, and you sort of withdraw from those things and focus your energy more back on home. How do you mentioned this at the beginning, but there's two ways to do it, because it's not necessarily wrong to continue serving in the church, or to continue going on a missions trip, or to continue being a part of the community in those ways. So why do you feel like it's not good for you specifically as a family? And do you foresee, especially this being a spiritual gift, where you feel like, hey, service is my spiritual gift. Yes, you're using that now in light of for your family. Maybe you're just shifting that service inwardly to Stephanie and the kids, as opposed to outwardly. But certainly there's nothing wrong inherently with using your spiritual gifts to continue to do so. So how do you balance that sort of judgment call? Yeah. I mean, is it your wife saying, okay, you've been gone for 5 of the 4 days, you need to come back, or is it how much, I guess, of that is guilt versus Christ? Yeah.
So, and for me personally, I guess to answer me personally, it wasn't anything, any kind of pressure to do it, but I felt, especially during COVID, with all the lockdowns and, in my opinion, government overreach, especially in our churches, that I just felt like I was having a bad attitude being up there as quote unquote worship leader, seeing, and people can think whatever they want about me, but seeing everybody with masks, and I don't hold anything against the common man or woman that was just trying to be, the good citizen and follow the rules. But for me, I was just seeing, in a way, our history repeating itself of different propaganda, making us live in fear, when we really, especially as Christians and Bible-believing church.
And your heart was, you're up there supposed to be calling us to worship and leading us in that, and your heart wasn't there. So.
Yeah, I felt like I had some resentment, and nothing against anybody in particular, but more so just our leaders in government. But I felt like I needed to step back and I think just get my head right. And maybe that wasn't a good move. Maybe that was a selfish move. Because I think there's definitely, in that moment, just searching my heart and asking God, what do you want me to do from here?
Yeah.
Should I continue, or should I just, step back and let someone else take the, take the mantle, if you will.
Right.
But I just felt like I just needed to step back because my heart wasn't in it, and I don't want to be up there being fake and, or just being resentful, because that, I'd rather be sitting down, listening to somebody else taking that spot. And not that it's a spot of like glory or anything like that, but of leadership, and just enjoy listening to them play the drums or no drums at all, and just enjoying being a part of the congregation regularly. And yeah, so I guess
you step back from church for those reasons. And then did you feel like Stephanie wanted you to come back from doing things like the missions trip, or was that too much depending on what else you guys do in the year in terms of vacations and things like that, being gone a lot or whatever? Is it a family, and your kids are young too, so you've got to obviously balance that with, hey, I need to be home and be involved in their life and sports or music or whatever they're doing, but also, like you mentioned, an example of Christ and leading them in prayer and Bible reading and things like that.
Yeah, and so not to jump, I guess, too far ahead or possibly another podcast, but so me stepping back during that time was for me personally because I felt like my heart, my attitude wasn't right. But to move forward, the decision to make sure our home base was solid was because of this recent event that my wife went through. And I guess I'll touch on it quickly, is that she was diagnosed with cancer. And so that really rocked us. Yeah. And then my best friend and my wife's best friend's husband passed away suddenly. And that's something that we can, I guess, go through on a different date. But that really just drew me back, just because that was another crisis of faith where we just didn't know anything other than just survive. Yeah. So right. That's also
you
why
lost your best friend and your wife is diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah. All in the middle
all
of
in about this,
just
all
coming out
of coming out of COVID.
Yep. Yeah. So
yeah, definitely a crisis of faith.
Yeah. And so that's where I guess that comment of really being, for one, solid in my faith in Christ and nurturing that, and so that I can be a good husband and a good father, and just make sure that she's taken care of and the kids are taken care of.
That sounds like an absolutely responsible thing to do. When I first heard you say that in the last episode, I was thinking to myself selfishly, how do I not do that? Because I love traveling and I love being involved.
Yeah.
And I also have a gift of service and want to help and do these things. And I'll be damned if I'm stuck here in my home, whatever. So it's like, I want to hear more about that. But now I'm like, wow, that's the exact right move. It's exactly what we would do in the military when you're running low on supplies or whatever. It's not to retreat isn't bad necessarily. It's the impetus and the heart behind it. And you've got exactly the right heart and motivation to do that, is to say, wow, there is absolute chaos and carnage all around us right now. Withdraw the family, bring them behind the lines, protect my wife and kids behind me as I figure this out before the Lord. And let's grow together and be strong. And then you reemerge back into all of this, but on the same wavelength, at the calling of the Lord, and not yourself, and with the right heart and motivation, and able to help your friends who just lost their husband, or your other friends who are going through similar things with cancer or this situation or that, and being able to get back into continued service, but now on the foundation of Christ, which is,
Yeah, and not to bring any trauma back up, but basically right when she was going through it, your parents had the accident. You can listen to the other podcast, and
everything was falling apart.
Yeah, shout out to your parents, because especially your mom was a great source of hope for Stephanie. And
my dad would have been too, in his defense. He was
he was just unconscious.
Just unconscious.
Yeah, both of them for sure. But definitely this is a great chance to thank everybody for all their prayers, all their donations, because like we literally didn't have to pay for anything, it seemed like.
You're talking about for Stephanie.
Yeah, for Stephanie throughout the. Like, it was more expensive than you think, even after you meet the whatever you
all
call
the Washington Health standards and the income standards and the
and so so just thank you everybody, especially for your prayers, because me and Stephanie both have not felt God that close before. So,
Yeah. Do you want to share with the audience the good news? She
is cancer-free, which is considered in remission, so now she's in the maintenance stage to keep it from coming back. So that's a really, really, praise God.
And she's got a sweet hairdo.
Yep.
I saw that.
Yep. Everybody loves it. So Stephanie, if you're listening to this podcast, which you probably are eventually, everybody loves your haircut, including me. It's not the woman. No, it's not the haircut that makes the woman. It's the woman that makes the haircut.
Oh yeah.
So.
And you are rocking it. So yeah. Yeah. So cool. Yeah.
So,
No, praise be to God. And she did such a great job encouraging. She probably didn't know this because she's not an extrovert like I am, but everybody around her was like, "Oh my goodness, she's so young. She's going through this cancer."
Yeah.
They expect her to just be in total, I don't know, depression and self-loathing or whatever. But she was always so bubbly and so friendly and so
Everybody
kind and so
said that,
sweet, and that alone speaks volumes to God and the peace in her life, even if she didn't realize it in her mind.
Yeah,
to everybody else, they're like, "Man, she is rock solid. Lord, you are amazing." So, shout out to
she didn't feel that way, but everybody that she came in contact with at the hospital was beside themselves at how quickly she recovered.
Yeah,
how joyful she always was. Which goes to her middle name, which is Joy. So, good job, Rick and Gloria.
Great job living up to the name there.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh man, cool.
So that's the reason behind the previous podcast comment. So.
Yeah, and so now she's obviously doing much better, and we're out of COVID, and you guys are working through what this looks like in the next stage for you guys, and your kids are a few years ahead of mine, and so I'm looking to you for examples and for for advice as I do as I see you guys running around. But for me, one of my spiritual gifts is missions and service and being able to go abroad and travel, and I love to serve, and I feel that is the epitome of what the gospel means. It's not just something we talk about or share. It's actually an action, which is serving others and giving gifts and helping out in their needs. And so to me, I always end up on the other end of that spectrum where it's like, how can I travel more? I mean, we were just talking about this with a Disney cruise. Like, you guys mentioned it briefly, and I'm already 4 pages into the itinerary.
My dad would be very proud of you. He's the same way. Very much. Yeah, I think that's actually it was his job in the Marines is
logistics and planning. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a joy for me. But any excuse I can find to make an itinerary and plan something and do an excursion somewhere, I'm going to do, and I'm going to, then my sin is to justify it and say, well, the Lord is calling me to this, and but it's totally sometimes at the expense of my family and the sanity of my wife or the life on life with my kids. And so I'm encouraged by this because you're taking such a huge step back and gathering the troops and strengthening your family and pouring into this. And I guess for me, what I want to know is from a logical standpoint as men, as a practical answer. Maybe there's not one yet, but what does that look like into when it's time to come back? Like for me, I'm on the other side. Okay, I want to slow down. I also need to step back. I know I need to rally my troops and bring my family under this umbrella of the Lord and be better at shepherding my wife and shepherding my children. So how do I know when to do that? And for on your end, how do you know when to come back out of that? What are those triggers or those, I don't know. I'm a computer guy, so I'm always thinking ones and zeros. When is that logical step of triggering the next event here?
So I guess two things. For me, I guess the reason why I do the mission trips is because it's for me, I guess personally, I mean, I enjoy doing them because I'm a servant at heart.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge because it's not my comfort zone. In particular, one trip, I went to Africa, Rwanda specifically, to help out with basically a Christian sponsorship program there, just to come alongside.
I did not know this. Was this through the church?
No. So it was actually through Blake Allen.
Oh.
When I had
Shout
Facebook.
out to Blake.
Yeah. He is actually... if I remember correctly, he's the American side representative of Best Family Rwanda.
Okay.
And then also through multiple trips, another lady, Tanya Rush and Scott Rush, I think I got his name right, they started under his umbrella, which is, I think, a town down from where Best Family Rwanda serves. And both of them are basically Christian schools where kids get sponsored and they get to go to the Christian school. And they're fed. And so vulnerable children in those areas, unfortunately get caught up in trafficking and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So for them to be in a safe community, that's their motto. They have a mission motto, but when I was there, one of the guys who was a founder, 3 guys actually, they're Rwandan genocide survivors. And his motto was you give a hand up, not a handout. So they're getting people out of poverty or out of their situation into this community that's focused on Christ's hope. And then as they get discipled, or just as they get taught what salvation is, and then they get discipled afterwards, they're incentivized or they're encouraged to give back to the community, even at a young age. So like say a kid comes in at grade school, becomes saved and gets discipled and is just going through school being sponsored. Once he kind of ages out, he just becomes like a youth advisor. So it's like a circle of community.
Giving back.
Yep.
So you went out there?
Yep. Went out there for like a week and a half. And so I guess to go back to the reason why I do those things is because, for one, I'm spontaneous. I'm a youngest child, and I don't really plan things very well. So Blake was doing it, and I really love Blake, and I wanted to just be there with him, and it sounded fun. So
nice.
Thank God that people were very generous, including my work. Gave lots of money to get me to go there.
Which job was this?
T. Bailey.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
He gave, I think, like more than $1,000. So I needed a certain amount of thousands of dollars.
Sure.
So, anyways, yeah. So to go back, that was my biggest challenge, not because I was necessarily anxious. Well, I guess I was anxious, but I was just anxious to leave my family for so long. So shout out to everybody who serves in the military and missionaries that leave their families, especially service members. I can't imagine how you guys do it. And so my hat is off to you guys for doing that.
Was this part of what we talked about in the last episode, a struggle for you particularly in terms of the anxiety, or was this something you think it was just hard in general? Like you said, you're service oriented, that's your spiritual gift, but traveling so far and being away for that long and things.
Yeah, I think it was just the time away and knowing that.
Yeah.
And
your kids were much younger.
Yeah, much younger. Yeah, like in the early grade school ages, and they were totally fine. It was me worrying that I didn't need to worry about. And
she's like, I'm fine.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Are you sure over there? What are you gonna do? You're halfway around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not gonna swim back or anything. But anyways, so the service was easy for me because that's just
natural.
And I love culture.
Yeah,
and I've always wanted to be. I've always admired African culture and just. If I could say this without sounding like an anti-racist or whatever, I've loved Black people before it became popular to be a virtue signaler. Okay, so just take that for what it's worth. Yeah, before all this stuff came out, I loved Black people because I understood. Just I don't know. They're good at everything.
Yeah,
they're good at everything, and that's a good thing. So, anyways, I'm sure somebody's not gonna like that comment, but that came from a pure heart.
Hey,
as pure as it could be. Anyways.
We're too sensitive these days, so it's okay to be who you are.
Yeah. So going back to the time, like when's a good time not to, when's a good time to.
Like how do you know? Like you're in right now. You're in the rebuilding, build up the troops, strengthen your wife, strengthen your kids state. When do you know? When are you going to know, or when do you know that it's okay to come back to volunteering more in the church, or your community, or traveling more, or without the guilt? Is it guilt that it's holding you back? Or is it more like just the insurance of Christ of like, this is where he has me and this is where I need to invest?
Yeah, I think it's more that. I don't know if it's necessarily guilt because I feel totally fine. Like
mine is guilt. So I'm speaking from
well, mine is guilt at times too, but I think I've got to the point where it's like, I've stopped caring what people think.
Oh, okay.
Even though I do care about what people think because my anxiety.
What a terrible, trying life.
Yeah, exactly. But I think two things is that it's like, when people are like coaxing you back in because they know that you're ready to get back into it. And then also, you know, your family life, your wife or your children are like, you know, hey dad, or
Why
hey,
are you
husband.
home so much?
Yeah, like you're like we're good. You know, we know that you enjoy doing this. You know, you can go out there and we're fine. And
Yeah.
I don't know how that.
Well,
guess
maybe
would
it's a
manifest
time to
itself.
take your, you know, it's an opportunity to take one of your sons with you at
Yep.
one point, and it's like, okay, now you're old enough, and this is an opportunity for you to stretch and grow because it's going to be, you know, totally
Exactly, yeah.
uncomfortable for you too. So
Yeah, and that's actually what I'm planning on next year is bringing my oldest to Mexico.
Oh, cool.
Which is really cool because our youngest, he's only 10 and he really wants to go. He wants to go to like the places where there's like Islam, and I'm like, not yet, not until you're like way an adult and I don't have to worry about you.
So
as
he's
much.
got a heart for missions.
Yeah.
It sounds like, yeah.
So he's sad that he can't go to Mexico just yet, just because logistically his age.
Sure.
But so seeing that heart there, and then my oldest son, he's just very much. He's a good follower. Like, you know, you tell him to do something, he'll do it, and
Yeah.
he's a good helping hand. So,
Awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know. I definitely think prayer is very important. And then I think if you find yourself either too comfortable being away and ignoring duties,
Like me.
not that you are,
No.
I'm just saying,
That's fair. That's me.
but also like me, I can totally be comfortable like being, forget the world.
Yeah.
I'm happy, right? I'm the grumpy old man. Like, get off my porch. I didn't start that way, but the more I listen to podcasts, which that's
Just
also
some old Chamoran over here in your flip flops and
flip-flop.
tank top and tatted up.
Yeah.
What are you kids doing?
So yeah, there's definitely two sides of that sword. So
Yeah.
being too comfortable when you back away to have a recess, I guess, and then being so busy, which I actually have found that busyness helps my anxiety because I like, just like when there's family gatherings, like, oh yeah, we got something planned,
Yeah.
something to look forward to rather than
Gets you out of your head.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
I don't know if
Really,
answered
that
your
doesn't
question.
stress you out. That's interesting. And my wife or others, particularly that have anxiety, it's usually like, this is up and coming, and they're just more anxious about it. Like, I've learned to tell my wife that we're leaving for a trip the night before, as opposed to weeks
Yeah.
or months in advance, because then she'll stress about it, and she still won't pack until the morning of.
That's me.
She'll like, it's like we're leaving at 4 a.m. to get on the road, and she's packing at 2 a.m. I'm like, you could have packed at 10 the night before and been just fine and slept through the night, but she won't because of her anxiety or,
Oh, okay.
or whatever. And
Mine's
so,
just procrastination. So
That
maybe
too.
it's not the same.
no, she's the youngest also, so there's something there, but it's, or not the youngest, but close to. And but helping facilitate those times by saying, hey, everything's planned. You don't have to worry about anything. And this is when we're leaving.
Yeah.
You've got 4 hours, go.
Yep,
You know,
that's
like,
what I need.
It's like she's totally clueless about it, which is nice in that there's no stress or anxiety buildup. But okay, well, that's good to know. I'm asking for personally selfish reasons because, like I said, I've got an opposite problem where you tell me there's an opportunity to do something, and I'm already brainstorming, how to make that happen. And
Which I was that way too.
yeah,
Yep.
and I think mine is more of an escapism sometimes, and a lot of it came down to growing up here and not wanting to be back here.
Yeah.
I was stationed back here in the Navy, and that sucked. And then I was like trying to get away all the time. And then I got married and went to college and came back, and I was like, no, this is actually a great place. But there's still, as a believer now, I drive around the island, especially in real estate, and I go to all these places, and I see places that remind me of my past sins.
Yeah, me too.
And they're not, it's not helpful in some cases. Early on when I first came back here, it was that way. And it was like, I feel like I'm settling. I feel like I'm planting roots, and I'm going to grow stagnant, and I'm going to die. And my nomadic Native American spirit is like, I need to go. It's time to pick up and go. And growing up in the military and moving every 3 years, part of that is like, okay, time to go, clean slate. And so coming back and saying, wow, I've been here longer now than I've been ever anywhere else in the world. And to be reminded of, oh, that beach is where you did this sin. Mm-hmm. And this part of the island is where this sin happened. It's like Satan can really get in my mind and in my heart and cause me a lot of depression over my attempt to walk faithfully for the Lord. And I've had to learn through the last many years, like, hey, the Lord is using these moments to help me encourage others that have been there as well, but also to teach my children, like my children are growing up here too. They're going to have a lot of baggage in this place.
Yeah.
How do I help them look at this place and make the right choices so that they look at this as home as opposed to a place to escape?
Yeah.
But also when they mess up, how to seek forgiveness and restitution right away, as opposed to wallowing in it through guilt or for whatever reason. And so a lot of my travel and enacting my spiritual gifts have been at the justification of really escapism as opposed to honoring the Lord. And so I've had to learn to step back and say, okay, how can I use these vacations now instead of vacations to serve me and my rest period or whatever, but instead to do mission trips or to support those that are going, or to really care for my wife and shepherd her needs and my kids' needs, and be more stable here. And so I'm encouraged by you and your ability to do that, which may not have been intentional. It may have been at the start of COVID and your wife's cancer and those things, but it may have totally been intentional as well. But I'm encouraged to have you as a firstborn. I never get the privilege of having someone else do this before me. Yeah. And so I'm encouraged to have you ahead of me.
Us younger ones drive you guys nuts.
Well, now I'm encouraged to have you as a big brother of like, you're doing this ahead of me. Your kid's a little older. You're going through all this. You've been married longer, and so I get to sort of ride your coattails instead.
Yeah.
Like
definitely
learn from you, which
Yeah.
is nice, as opposed to trying to break the icebergs of the, as myself. So this has been good for me.
Lots of quick sorries and repentance right away.
Yeah.
Because it just festers.
As we do as men, and we need to. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you again, and this has been a shorter episode. Thank you all for those of you who are tuning in from around the world, including Rwanda. So I've got not Rwanda, but Uganda outside area, specifically friends from Afghanistan that served over there that are running an orphanage, and they are listening in to this podcast when they wake up at night, and so. They are encouraged to hear how the Lord is working in Americans' lives, my brother.
And if you ever want to, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
go ahead.
If you ever want to kick the American, what do you call that when you get jaded? Seriously, go on a short-term mission trip to Africa or any place that's
Not America.
Yeah, that's not America, basically.
Right.
Yeah, you'll appreciate your stuff.
That's what I'm struggling with a lot, or not struggling with, but thinking through a lot right now. And I put this in my recent newsletter was, as a father, how do I raise these entitled American children who I love and I want to give the best of? How do I raise them to be thankful and respectful and appreciative of the things they do have without being manipulative, right? Because the other part of that is now I'm just a scientist testing them and putting them in positions that are difficult on purpose so that they learn, and I think the right balance to that, or the exposure to that, is to expose them to those places around the world, and not necessarily thrusting them in and saying, go do these things because I'm manipulating you and you're, you're going to learn from this suffering, this period of suffering, but taking them alongside me as I also work and exposing them to these harsh places and the people that are truly suffering and helping them realize, wow, there's a bigger world.
Yep.
I do have it all. I need to be more thankful, and that's a good point. So
and if we don't protect what we do have, we could end up just like them. And nothing against those countries, because I think if we look back at our history, there are certain countries that actually were thriving, but then or a certain ruler got in and totally destroyed that freedom that they enjoyed before that said ruler got in there.
Right.
So it can always be reversed, but sometimes it takes a lot more fighting than maybe we're willing or that we can do on our own. So that's why community is very important, I think.
That is a perfect segue into the next episode, which requires me to ask if you'll be considering to be on my podcast again.
Definitely.
I always ask on the spot because it's live and all my listeners want to know.
Again, as long as I don't tank your reviews.
No, you won't take my reviews. What reviews? I think what I would like to hear and be curious of as we go into the next week's episode is what you are passionate about outside of where Christ has put you, and how that what you feel called to as a leader. And if you had the stage in front of other men, how you would exhort us. And is that to call us to arms? Is that to call us to stand and fight to protect our way of life? Is that to call us to X, Y, and Z, you name it? But I know you're a man of passion and a man who has a lot of well-rounded input in your life, and so you can articulate that well for myself and my audience maybe next week. So
sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Well, as always, it's been an honor to have you on the show. And to those listening and tuning in, this has been Kevin Blas, great friend, man of the Lord, wonderful husband and father. And I'm looking forward to having you again on the show.
Ditto.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Anna Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.